Imagine a government where unelected officials hold more power than the people's elected representatives. Sounds alarming, right? Unfortunately, this is the reality we're facing today. What's up, everyone? I'm Gino DiCaprio, and welcome to my page, where we dive into the most pressing issues affecting our democracy. Today, we're going to tackle a critical issue that's been eroding our democracy: the unchecked power of unelected bureaucrats. The United States is founded on a simple yet powerful principle: the people should be in control. However, over the years, this principle has been eroded, with unelected bureaucrats and one branch of government accumulating too much power. It's time to restore the balance and ensure that the people, through their elected representatives, are truly in charge. One of the main problems with unelected bureaucrats is that they are not accountable to the people. They can make decisions and laws that affect millions of Americans without ever having to face the consequences of those decisions. This is not how democracy is supposed to work. As the Pacific Legal Foundation notes, the very essence of democracy is that, by voting, we can hold elected officials accountable for their performance. Another issue is that unelected bureaucrats often ignore congressional commands and make their own laws through administrative regulations. This undermines the separation of powers and the democratic process. As Senator Ricketts points out, the decision reaffirms the importance of our elected representatives in making laws. But there's another problem: the lack of balance between parties. Over the past 100 years, the Democratic Party has held power nearly twice as long as the Republicans in both the Senate and the House. This has led to a concentration of power that undermines the principles of our republic. Even when Republicans have won presidential elections, Democrats have often maintained significant control through their dominance in the legislative branch, particularly the Senate. This has allowed them to shape policy and block Republican initiatives. Furthermore, the bureaucratic apparatus of the federal government has often been staffed by Democrats, who have maintained control over various agencies and departments. This has enabled them to influence policy implementation and regulation, even when Republicans held the presidency. The consequence of this imbalance is that, even when Republicans win presidential elections, they often face significant obstacles in implementing their policy agendas. This has led to frustrations among Republican voters and accusations of Democratic obstructionism. In a republic, power is not held directly by the people, but rather by elected representatives who are accountable to the people. This system provides a safeguard against the tyranny of the majority and ensures that individual rights are protected. However, when one party dominates the government for an extended period, it can lead to abuses of power, infringement on individual rights, and a lack of accountability. To reclaim our republic, we must remind ourselves of the Constitution's wisdom. The Appointments Clause, for example, requires unelected federal officials with significant power to be nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. This ensures accountability and prevents the accumulation of power in unelected hands. It's time to reassert the principles of our constitutional republic. We must demand that our elected representatives take the Constitution seriously, ensure that only Senate-confirmed officials issue binding regulations, and hold unelected bureaucrats accountable for their actions. This imbalance of power is not a recent phenomenon. It has been building up over the past century, particularly since the New Deal era under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Democratic Party's dominance in the executive branch during this period led to a lasting impact on the federal government's structure and personnel. For instance, during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate, limiting his ability to implement his policy agenda. Similarly, during the presidency of George W. Bush, Democrats regained control of Congress in 2006, restricting his ability to pass legislation. This pattern of Democratic control has continued to the present day. Even when Republicans have held the presidency, Democrats have maintained significant influence over the federal bureaucracy, allowing them to shape policy and regulation. To reclaim our republic, we must address this imbalance of power. We must ensure that our elected representatives are truly accountable to the people and that unelected bureaucrats do not wield excessive power. One step towards achieving this goal is to reform the federal bureaucracy. This can be done by implementing measures such as term limits for bureaucrats, transparency in regulatory decision-making, and congressional oversight of bureaucratic actions. Another step is to promote a culture of accountability within the federal government. This can be achieved by incentivizing whistleblowers to come forward, protecting them from retaliation, and ensuring that those who abuse their power are held accountable. Ultimately, reclaiming our republic requires a fundamental shift in how we think about power and accountability in government. We must recognize that our constitutional republic is founded on the principles of limited government, separation of powers, and accountability to the people. By promoting these principles and addressing the imbalance of power in our government, we can ensure that our republic remains a beacon of freedom, prosperity, and self-governance for generations to come.
Solutions for a balanced government.
We explored the problems of unelected bureaucrats and the imbalance of power in our government. Now, it's time to discuss solutions for restoring balance and accountability to our republic.
Reforming the federal bureaucracy.
The federal bureaucracy has become a powerful force in our government, with unelected officials making decisions that affect millions of Americans. To reform the bureaucracy, we need to implement term limits for bureaucrats. This would prevent career bureaucrats from becoming too powerful and entrenched. Increase transparency in regulatory decision-making. This would allow citizens to see how decisions are made and hold bureaucrats accountable. Strengthen congressional oversight of bureaucratic actions. This would ensure that Congress can hold bureaucrats accountable for their actions.
Promoting a culture of accountability.
A culture of accountability is essential for ensuring that bureaucrats are responsible for their actions. To promote this culture, we need to incentivize whistleblowers to come forward. This would encourage bureaucrats to report wrongdoing and hold their colleagues accountable. Protect whistleblowers from retaliation. This would ensure that bureaucrats who report wrongdoing are not punished for doing so. Hold bureaucrats accountable for their actions. This would ensure that bureaucrats who abuse their power are held accountable.
Recognizing the principles of our constitutional republic.
Our constitutional republic is founded on the principles of limited government, separation of powers, and accountability to the people. To reclaim our republic, we need to recognize the importance of limited government. This would ensure that the government does not overstep its authority and infringe on individual rights. Support the separation of powers. This would ensure that power is divided evenly between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Demand accountability to the people. This would ensure that elected officials are responsible to the people who elect them. By implementing these solutions, we can reclaim our republic and ensure that it remains a beacon of freedom, prosperity, and self-governance for generations to come. As we strive to reclaim our republic, what steps do you think are necessary to ensure that power is truly in the hands of the people rather than unelected bureaucrats?